This video is to overview the Big Lake Community Education Gymnastics lesson plan for weeks 5 to 8. I wanted to start over here at the block and low beam warm up and get a little more specific on some suggestions after I've tested it out. So the original video, I said I wasn't quite sure what would be best for traffic flow, etc. So after getting to help, I think this is what will help best. So I moved the blue blocks over to at least the blue line, and that should give a little bit more space. I also moved them this way towards us just a little bit so that when they land off the last one, like this, that they would walk to the white line. I did draw X's for the purpose of this video, but I also think it could be helpful if we use it in class. It can be distracting. They're gonna stomp on it. It's messy. It's not ideal to be making the gym a mess, but they just can't envision what we can envision. And so asking them to stand by the X's and then follow the arrow onto the beam might be helpful. Then hopefully when they get off the beam, wherever they here, then you can say walk on the white line to the X's. And hopefully that will allow more space for all the kids to stand and spread out just a little bit more. So please try those things this next time and see if they help. Those could of course also be dots, or you could line the kids up when you start, put 4 or 5 kids there and put 4 or 5 here and see where your friends are. That's where you go. When you get off the beam, you go where your friends are over there, and describe that a little bit different. Here we are over at vault. This is how the kneeling kick to handstand station should be set up. It's about 16 inches of matting, and I do recommend using these big panel mats as the mats there because the blocks slide a little bit more. The panel mats are just a little bit heavier, so when the kids kick off of them, they tend to stay a little bit more still. Some important things about this one: watch the video, see what different kids look like. We do not want them crashing into the wall. We don't want their shoulders on the wall. We don't want their butt on the wall or laying on the wall. The goal is that they're in a handstand and only their feet are touching the wall. So it would almost be better if they were in a piked half handstand to start, kind of like last week's station, and then they try to kick their feet off the mat, and maybe coming back down to the blue and tan mats would be a better mistake than just crashing or flopping into the gray wall. I do think one of the best spots could be if you could get them in a piked half handstand and kind of hold their middle still and then let them kick their feet on their own while you keep their trunk of their body from going into the wall. The problem is a lot of the kids' legs might go sideways and you could get kicked in the head, so you're gonna have to be on the lookout for kids who can't get their legs where they need to be with just you holding their middle and protect your head. But that's what I would do if I was helping a kid who was struggling with this station. I also do not have a line here on the mat, and you guys should let us know how it's going. We can put a tape line down. You can see there's some kind of gunk on the mat, and that kind of stinks. So we don't want to keep making a mess on the mat. Maybe if you could just draw a couple X's or put it down and take it off on the same day. I'm not sure if that's something you're experiencing with kids putting their hands too close or too far from the wall, but feel free to solve it with chalk or tape if that's what's the best fit. This is the next station listed on the lesson plan. It says Mancino block, springboard, big pit pillow. This is really gonna have to be watched and asked for specific directions because it really could be dangerous. It's also very helpful, but start off by making sure it's set up correct for your class. So each of those springboards should have 4 or 5 springs in it. So if it's more than that, they can't bounce on it anyways. And we're also using another springboard right now that needs that few springs. So the likelihood that you're gonna need to move springs or ask for help moving springs is pretty high. So all coaches are gonna need to help check the springboards when we start, because if class is going and everybody's busy and you realize there's too many springs and you aren't able to get them out, you're gonna be in trouble for your class. So please make sure before we start, all coaches check for that. Now the 5-6-year-olds, this is a big, tall order, but it's possible. What you're going to need to do is probably have the kids start the first round for 5-6 on that springboard already. And say, jump to the yellow line, jump to the pit pillow, and have them try that first. Because jumping from this to that and then aiming for the right place there is pretty hard. If you're 5-6 class, you know this sounds insane already. You can just take this springboard out and make the blue block touch the first springboard and just work on jump from the block to the board and jump to the pit pillow. So this is a hopefully know your class and recommend the correct item. And the idea is that they're trying to stay vertical from the block to the board to a stick finish soldier. So there's already a lot going on. Younger ages keep their hands on their hips, and then the older ages are trying to add the backwards arm circle. I think what would be best is if there is a high school age coach that can show it before they start. I think it would probably be more easy to understand if they see somebody do it right away. And again, when in doubt, pull the extra springboard so that nobody gets hurt. This station here, we're building on from last week. We're actually putting 2 stations together. So previously they did pop up here. Now we're going to donkey kicks here. So they're going from the panel mat to the springboard, or in this case, the trampoline, hands there and donkey kicking 5 times. For the 5-6s, it's feet together, feet together, feet together, bouncing 5 times. For the 7-8, they want to start back here and go step hurdle, which means step with 1 foot, jump to 2 feet, do their 5 donkey kicks. The intermediate age group needs to right away be given the chance to go step hurdle, handstand flat back. So we need to challenge them with that because we want them to be doing it later in the session to a resi, and so we want to let them be practicing that now. So the idea for the younger ages is, can we show them jumping to a handstand? Maybe they would tip over, but we do not want them doing a forward roll on accident. A donkey kick 5 times in a row would be better in this station instead of just flopping over to a forward roll. So make sure we're trying to teach them about heel driving to a handstand. When I set up this time, the red block was closest and safest by, so I used that one. And I think that's just fine if it's not a blue one. Just make sure there's something there so that we can have them safely crawl down onto it, not jump from up there all the way down to here. So hopefully they're safely completing something here if they're up on the mats for intermediates climbing down here. And then their 5 donkey kicks should end right here, where they might be able to just climb down right here or even take turns with a friend and stand somewhere back here. Again, none of these standing or safety rules has to be exact. That should be expected to change. Like, a kid doesn't need to hear the same exact thing from every single coach, but what they do need to hear is some sort of safety guideline, and then we need to repeat that and keep trying at it so that they aren't getting in dangerous situations. This is how the final vault station is set up. It's described like this, where the block touches the table, the safety zone touches the block, and the springboard is there. There will be a pit block there that they should hold above their head and do rebounders, where they're learning that jumping on a springboard should feel like jumping on a trampoline, where if they're tighter and they bounce on it more, that it should give them more flight afterwards. Then they can put the pit block down, climb up there, and we're doing straddle jump, stick, finish, soldier. So make sure that they know straddle jump means open, shut, out to the sides. When I describe that, I always have kids sit down where they're at in a straddle and show them that their knees are facing the ceiling and their legs go out wide, so that I have something to reference when they're jumping up in the air. And again, we want to be teaching them about their leg muscles, holding them up when they jump off of things. So when kids are repeatedly jumping off of high up beams and high up vault tables and just falling down, is where we're setting them up to potentially get injured. And we want them to be using those muscles. So Sometimes on vault, it gets a little crazy. Slow down there and make sure that everybody's doing that, and that will pay off for the future for vault and for beam dismounts. Here is the station that goes into the pit that's paired up with bars. Notice today I set it up with 2 panel mats. So in this case, for the younger kids, I would take off the top panel mat and then add the top panel mat for the older kids. So last round we had a block there. That's also fine, but currently the blocks are being used other places. So what we just want to offer to the older kids is a little bit higher of a jump down, and the younger kids possibly a lower jump down. Now they've done it a few more weeks, and if you feel your 5-6s are safe from that height, great. The 5-6s are also doing it from that height for vault, so maybe this is another good place to practice that. Just feel free at any time to adjust stations for the size and the ability of your kids to keep it productive and then keep it safe. This skill is straddle jump into the pit. Again, have them sit in a straddle, teach them what one is, and then make sure when they're jumping into the pit that they're trying to do that. Please continue to instruct kids that they want to land in the pit after the straddle jump in a stick position, which means on their feet with their arms forwards middle. So we don't want them landing on their back. We don't want them landing on their tummy. Their arms shouldn't be in crazy places. So as kids are continuing to jump into the pit in class, we want to keep giving those safety instructions that we don't land on our head in the pit and we don't land on our tummy. Overall, I think the kids are learning and doing a good job taking turns with their friends in the pit. Just keep enforcing there should be one person in the pit at a time, and that you shouldn't go until your friend is out of the pit and out of your way so you can take a good turn. We are using the rings here again for 5 and 6. The skill is an L hang, and then for 7 and older, the skill is a bat hang. Please take the time to think it through with what your students will need for the height of these rings. So they'll be a little bit higher than last time. The 5-6s can do a tuck hang if they're unable to do an L hang, but remember, we're trying to develop those tummy muscles to get their pullover, and that's a great way to work on it. You could also have a 5-6 after their L hang, pull their feet up to a bat hang if they're those crazy strong kids, and then you can also have the 7 and olders do an L hang if they're unable to get their feet up to a bat hang. The idea is to teach them on their bat hang that they're in a hollow, that they can see their feet, and that's what they're supposed to look like when they go upside down on a back hip circle. So as we go through the lesson plan and you get the chance to teach those back hip circles, if you haven't referenced a back hip circle during the bat hang, then they have one last chance to understand that skill a little better and hopefully get it on their own. So please make an effort at that. A lot of times if bat hangs are on the rings like this, you could instruct them to kind of, I don't want to say straddle, but separate their feet to where the outsides of their legs are pressing on the yellow rope. And that could maybe help some additional kids hold it that wouldn't otherwise. And then when they get the feel for that, then they can move their legs back together. But again, just like some kids aren't able to do a monkey flip on their own, they might not be able to get their feet all the way inverted on their own. So know which modifications you can give them otherwise to make sure they're developing some sort of muscles during this station. On this station, all the age groups are working on jump front support with an immediate cast back to the block. So they want to be jumping up, swing their legs, swing them as high as they can, and jump back down. So again, varying abilities with the kids, but if somebody could show what like a cast back to the block looks like, not just a push back to the block, that might give them the idea when you say try it bigger or reach your feet higher in the air or swing your legs bigger, then they might understand what they're aiming for. All the kids are going to do 3 of those and then switch with their friends, and as they get older we just want them to be able to connect them a little better. So the 5-6s will probably stop in between each one, adjust their hands, need to get a lot of motion ready for that big jump, where 7s and 8s might be looking more like they're bounding off the blocks and going back up and back down. But again, we want to get to where we're spotting all of these kids on back hip circles, and if they have never heard of a cast before and don't know what that is, that makes it a lot harder. So make sure that you're teaching the words jump to front support and cast, so that it makes your job easier when you get to doing extra back hip circles. This is the station where we're doing spider hangs. This is what we mean by 2 or 3 different heights. So you could easily take this little panel mat off, then take that panel mat off, use that one, and use them in different combos, really so their hands can get to the bar. But then from there, we want to be challenging them with this spider hang. So at its best, we want it to look like toe-ups, where they hook their feet on the bar at the top of each one. So please make sure that you watch the video of some children doing those spider hangs, because it's obvious why an intermediate might not think this station is very flashy or very important, because if they're tall and they can just hook a foot up there and hook a foot up there, they're gonna go, oh cool, I'm doing a spider hang. But until you show them how to like lift both feet at the same time, do it with their knees straight, do it with their feet pointed, connect 3 in a row where it's more challenging, that's where we know they're gaining the muscles, and they might go, oh, I guess this can be hard if I do it the hard way instead of the easy way. Here we have how beam 7 should be set up. It's just the beam, just a foam. The 3 dots are only for the intermediate class. The 5, 6, 7, 8 are working on bunny hop. Please teach them that means bouncing on their toes or jumping with their feet, that they should try to do it with their feet in a line or at least staggered, but not next to one another. And that as challenges, you can ask them to one pass, do 1 foot in front, the other pass, do the other foot in front, and really just encourage them to go quickly, but to not keep going bounce, bounce, touch the carpet, bounce, bounce, touch the carpet. I know it might seem obvious, but if you can be teaching kids to look at the end of the beam, use their eyes to stare at the beam, a lot of kids don't look at it, and it's not a mystery why they fall. So please be teaching them to keep their belly button pointed at the beam. A lot of kids kind of turn their hips sideways, make their knees face the end of the beam, and keep trying to give them tips how to keep them on it and do their bunny hop a little better. Again, we're doing a straddle jump dismount to the pit. So there it is again. We're doing it off the vault table, we're doing it off the springboard, and we're doing it off the beam. And so we really want to help kids learn that term and know what it is. For the intermediate class, here they're doing a turn drill. So that's where they go hands on their hips and their favorite foot in front, and plie, passe, releve, and hold it for 3, 2, 1, step in the front and bend, finish. It is tricky, it's complicated, keep trying. If we can get all of our intermediates to know what those are, that's where they can be doing half turns. We can be doing half and full turns in advanced class, and it really does make a big difference for any intermediate who's been asked onto the Excel team, make that go a lot better. So please work at it, and if you're not sure what one is, please ask, and I think I have a video of one that I'll add to the playlist so you can see and then rehearse those words with it. Then over here is how we're setting up this laser beam with 2 panel mats. So it's kind of like 2 stations in one. So at the laser beam, they're starting on that mat and jumping onto the beam. So we want them to be getting their feet far away from the beam. So 5 and 6s, they're doing a straight jump. And then 7 and olders are doing a tuck jump. We do need to teach them how their feet are supposed to land on the beam. They don't know, and if you don't, you need to learn how so you can teach them. So a lot of kids want to put their feet all the way side by side, and on the laser beam that's possible because it's wider than a regular beam. But when they land a jump on beam, they do want their feet to be either staggered, kind of like a puzzle piece, where like one foot fits into the other one, where one's slightly in front, or we want them all the way lined up, which we do with our team kids and high schoolers, which is called toe to heel. So when their feet get even bigger, they need more room on the beam. So when kids do their feet side by side, like matching all the way, they end up turning their feet sideways because they know their feet won't fit. So start teaching them how to put one foot slightly in front of the other, and then ask them to be bravely jumping. So jumping from that mat to the beam is higher than most kids can jump on the beam. So it's teaching them how their feet how to find the beam after they jump off of hopefully the beam someday that they're jumping that high. Then they're gonna walk to this end. And I would not be picky about how they get from there to there. other than walk on the beam. So just let them walk regular, let them walk flat foot. Just say, don't touch the carpet. Maybe say the carpet's like hot lava, keep your feet on top of it. Anytime you're on a beam, you should practice keeping your feet on the beam. But if you try and do anything complicated in between, they really might not get very many turns there. And then here is where they're gonna start doing a partial kick to handstand leading up to a full kick to handstand. So at the minimum for 5, 6, that would start looking like a teeter-totter where their feet are here and their hands touch there. And then we want to encourage them to do a little jump and then a medium one, a big one, and so on and so forth. So I have a video of me showing the different steps of that. So please watch it and please know what those steps are. But what we don't want to do is get kids where they're going both feet down at the same time. So it would be better to do a teeter-totter and have their feet not leave the beam but stay lined up correctly than for them to jump really high off the beam and then end up coming down in a straddle on the beam. So it just really doesn't feel the same. You want them to keep their feet lined up, one higher than the other at first, and then after they touch together, make sure they come down in that first foot, other foot fashion. And again, telling them we don't want to practice planning on falling off the beam. You want to be working on staying on it right away from these little jumps. We also need to teach them when their hands are on the blue mat, they should be looking at the beam and putting their feet where their eyes are looking. And most kids won't naturally do that. They'll look towards their hands or even tip their chin up and arch their back. And then they're guessing if their feet are going to land back on the beam. So please teach them that when they're in that teeter-totter, they should be looking at their foot on the beam, and then they can jump it up a little bit higher and they should watch their foot land back where it started. This beam this round, they're going to mount and then not really do any walking. I mean, just enough to jump to about where the dot is. So the focus is on the knee scale and on the dismount. So where this is helpful is that we know a lot of kids struggle with learning the correct way to mount the beam, which is sitting in a straddle, hooking their toes up behind them, and then ending up on their hands and knees first, then standing up. And because this station doesn't require standing up past that, it really incentivizes them to do it the way that we want them to, because there's no reason to not, because they're stopping on their hands and knees. And then is also a chance to work more on what I already kind of discussed in the video about a good jump off to a stick position dismount. So they're going to get to try extra of those because they're not spending so much time walking across the beam. And that's where you can really coach them at it. We want their legs to be working where they're not collapsing in their legs, they're not falling forwards, and that they're learning their body. So hopefully those extra chances at it will help. The purpose of the knee scale is to work on the muscles that are behind your legs. Those are the same muscles for a teeter-totter, an arabesque, and anything that kicks backwards, like a front layout or a split jump. So we often on bars are working their tummy muscles so much, lifting their legs up in the front, but the muscles we need in the back, like for a cast, we don't work as easily as often. So that knee scale, we want them to be clamping the beam with butterfly hands. So their hands should match each other, their thumbs touching together. That's also the hands for a handstand. So we want them to be comfortable holding the beam in that position. And then squeezing that leg straight out to the back and holding it is a strength move for those muscles in the back of their leg, but also for their core. So for the youngest kids, they're holding it for 5 seconds, whichever one they like the most, then walk to the green dot and jump down. And then we can encourage them to try both sides. So say next time, try it on your other knee, and hopefully they'll figure that out. The next age is do one side and the other side in the same turn. So look for that and ask them to do it. Then the older kids is both legs in the same turn, but then holding it for 10 seconds instead of 5. So that is 100% one I would practice on the ground during either beam instructions or during warm-up instructions. So if you notice you have that later and you're over on another warm-up, you can say, okay, everybody copy me right now. This is called a knee scale. We're going to do it later on beam today. So try to remember what this is so that when you get over to beam, that it makes it easier. And you could even say, if there's like a partner here, could you put a dot right there on the carpet or right there? And you could even have the partner try one on the ground while they're waiting. because that is kind of a foreign position for a lot of kids, and we're asking them to do it in the air. But again, we have to teach them why it's important and celebrate when they do good at it, because that is a station that some kids might consider boring or not important. And as a coach, you might even feel that way if you didn't know all the reasons we're doing it. So please take the time to learn about that and ask them to improve at it and tell them when they're getting better at it. We again, during beam, have one bar station. The reason that we chose to do so was so that kids get a little bit of bars every week that they come here, especially when kids are absent. That means sometimes that they were going almost a month without doing bars, and it's already the hardest thing. So this is their chance to continue to work on those bars muscles even when they don't have a whole thing of bars. So the 5-6 group is going here for wall walk pullover. It's important to teach them that their arms need to stay bent. So it's not like a bat hang where they straighten their arms. They need to keep their chin as high up as possible while they're doing it. And we need to ask them to finish in front support. So as they're sitting up, they kind of just flop over the bar the first time. Then we need to teach them pullovers finish in a front support. Here's how you do it. Make sure you try to do that at the end. Then age 7 and older is trying their running pullover over here. So they've done the wall walk already with the alfang blocks. So they're trying their pullover without it. Again, here's a mat. Some kids might need it. Some kids might not need it. Some kids can't do their pullover yet. And we know that. Can we spot them? Yes. Do we need to teach them to be able to try it on their own as well? Yes. So teach them what it looks like to run and jump and then not quite make it, but keep your arms bent and then put your feet back down on the floor so that they can safely and productively be trying it on their own. And we should be telling them, as long as you're keeping your arms bent, and kicking your feet up as high as you can, your muscles are getting stronger every time you're trying. So you might make it next time, even if you don't today, if you keep working on those muscles. Now, those alfang blocks are right there. Could you pull that up and let them do a wall walk pullover? 100% yes. If that's what's best for your class, you have 0 pullovers in your class, you need a lot of help other places, just pull one up and use it. The one thing I'll caution you against is some kids are pretty close to their pullover and don't realize it, and they'll just pick to keep running up the wall. So especially if a kid's close, encourage them to try it on their own. Say that you'll spot them and then just spot them a tiny bit and make sure that we're asking them to try it, because without being asked to, some kids just will decide not to. Moving on to floor, we use the medium beam for that. Please make sure there's a mounting mat there, and then feel free to move that mounting mat further this way if the kids are a little bit more tentative and a little bit slower. So sometimes it's better if they get in 3 whole turns of half the beam rather than 1 turn of the whole beam. So move that mat as you need, and any time that you can, ask them to use the mounting mat instead of just sticking their feet in the legs. That's not wrong, but what we want them to be able to do is get themselves over to a straddle sit on the beam, tucking their toes up behind them. And then for ages 5 through 8, we're walking sideways. That should start flat feet, hands on their hips. If you can, ask them to go face one way one time, the other way the next time. If they're bold enough for that, then you can ask them to go up to releve in the 7 and 8 class, or for brave 5s and 6s. And then again with the dismount thing off the end. Ask them to be working on landing in their feet. It is in one of the warm-ups to practice stick finish soldier, but we can't just keep saying things we know as common terms as if they know what that means. So we say it over and over and over again, and it almost turns into like something they don't realize that they're saying. So a stick means that your feet don't go anywhere and that your knees are bent. And then you want to show them where their arms go, and then make sure if they're holding them bent and tucked in that you walk around and pull their arms straight out in the front. And then that finish is when their feet come together and they reach for the sky, and then soldier. Then in the intermediate class, it says to put a shoelace halfway across the beam. You could also accomplish that by putting a dot on the ground and then saying when they get to there that they're going to pivot turn. So they start walking backwards, which should be hands on hips and flat feet. Then when they get to the shoelace, go on their tiptoes and spin around. And then they finish with a forwards walk in releve. So if you've got bold kids and they can walk in releve and arms crown backwards, you go for it. But we haven't done a lot of walking backwards, and if they're nervous, be fine with flat feet and hands on hips. The one thing you don't want to let them do is shuffle backwards. So a lot of kids, when they get going backwards, leave their feet in the same order. They won't take a full step. They just kind of scooch their feet. So please do ask them for one big whole step, 1 foot behind the other. And then they haven't done a lot of pivot turns in this session either. So please know that that's new information. They haven't walked backwards. They haven't done a pivot turn. And we can't assume that any kid, even if they've been in our classes, that they remember everything that they've ever done. So please make sure you're teaching everything during class as if it's brand new information at all times. So this is the cartwheel station. Most kids need to use this one or they need to use that one. So this would be the place to start from. Notice we're using the line so that they have something to aim for and that there's a line on the mat. And it starts with a puddle jumper. So 2 feet to 2 feet jumping over the side, then start with their hands already on the mat and lined up, kicking over one at a time like a straddle. Please watch any video that's given. I have one on how to spot a cartwheel. We need to see this as something that is changeable. So I think a lot of coaches look at a kid and they go, they can do a cartwheel or they can't do a cartwheel, but no one's ever taught them one except us. So we need to show them what one looks like correctly. They might have only seen a friend do one incorrect in their backyard. So we need to make sure one is shown to them how it's supposed to be done and that we're attempting to spot them and help them. They really, really can improve at it in one moment if they understand something they didn't before. So keep trying, even though it can be very frustrating or feel uphill. Then if kids can already do their cartwheel over this mat is when we want to move them to the line over there in between the mats. And then those mats can creep inwards towards that blue line based on their ability. So in intermediate, we want those mats probably as close together as like the laser beam would fit in between. So we can say, we want to do cartwheels on the laser beam. This is like practicing it on the laser beam. Make sure that you can land on this line without letting your feet touch the blue mat. And again, with an intermediate, they might think, oh, I've done so many cartwheels. But if they're not doing a start position, they're not doing a lunge, if their belly button's facing sideways, if their feet aren't facing the correct way when they're on the line, we know that will create a problem when they're trying on the beam. So please make sure that you have something to say to help them improve at it. Then moving over to the cheese mat is where we're doing backward rolls. And again, I need you to watch the video that shows the steps and try to figure out where kids are at and help them get to the next one. And again, we can be asking intermediates to lace their fingers together and try them with straight arms. There are some kids, you show them what one of those is and they can do one without needing extra help learning how to do it just by being shown. So please make sure that they've seen what that is, that they've been taught what that is, and that we're trying to help them. It doesn't have to go perfect, but we do have to try to give them that information. Then on trampoline over here is where kids are doing knee drops. The idea is that they stay vertical from the top of their head down to their knees when they hit the trampoline and bounce back up. And then for the intermediate class, they're doing push-up shaped tummy drops. So I did a video this summer for knee drops and I'll include that in the playlist. Please make sure you watch it if you have not coached a lot of knee drops so you can see what that looks like. And then for push-up shaped tummy drop, please connect with a high school athlete that you work with and have them show you what one of those looks like if you are not familiar with what that is. Once you see it, it's not that complicated and you'll understand. But if you don't know what that is, you will not be able to teach one. So the idea is that we're working on bouncing with their shoulders, landing on their tummy and bouncing back up to that push-up position. It's wrists, it's core, it's leg, it's all a full body exercise, but please make sure that you know what that is so you can teach it. And then it's okay to ask a coach to come over and show it to your group quick if you need somebody to do that. So just communicate before. You might need to pause something quick for them to show. But again, if the kids can't envision what it looks like, they won't be able to copy it. I'm going to give one last note about giving instructions to your class. I think this area is especially where it's tricky. The less they can move around, the better. So if you could have maybe the kids touch their backs to here, or sometimes we'll say touch your toes to the blue mat, or like, I do not think there's a problem with having kids sit on a beam. So if you're describing bars like right over here and nobody's on this beam, I do use beams like chairs because they know exactly where they're supposed to be then. Sometimes we do have to have kids move around to get a better view of something, but I would always plan for that station then to be described first or be described last, so then they could stay still for 3 in a row. When kids are not in a line, they don't have a specific place to be, they're just gonna pick wherever, and it can be so frustrating and so hard to get across what you need to when they're moving around and fidgeting and doing what they're not supposed to. So feel free to like before class starts, maybe you need to clean this stuff up, maybe we need to move some of this stuff over to give a more clear space to stand. Remember, when we're setting up, often we're setting up quick and we're depending on everybody to help us get set up, and so something might be left a certain way just because we didn't get to cleaning that up yet. So if you don't have good spaces for kids to stand, feel free to help create that.